Torah Yud Aleph. It's short, but as it gets to the end, we're going to get to. It says that he says I expand upon this idea in Torah Yud Chet, which I thought would be the next one we would do, and then hopefully Bezrat Hashem, if we have time, we'll go back to do Torah Yud, which is in a wild way to look at the Arba meaning. So we'll hopefully get to those three, Bezrat Hashem. I apologize in advance if I make any mistakes, and also if you hear me crunching in the middle. Okay, so
this is Parshas Emor. Yeah?
We're in Parshat Emor. It's where the Emor is known for one of the only two places, Shmot and Emor in Sefer Shmot, and I believe it's Kitisa.
Mishpatim.
Mishpatim, and in Emor are the two places where the Chagim are mentioned. So the Zera Shimshon has some wild ideas about Sukkot from Parashat Emor, so we're going to go into that. So we'll start with Yud Aleph. So it says Midrash Yalkut Shimoni. It says Basukot Teshru, and it says the Yalkut Shimoni says Amar Rabbi Levi Kol Misha Mekayem Mitzvat Sukkah Ba'olam Hazeh Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Kiyem Mitzvat Sukkah Ani Masich Alav Michamato Shel Yom Haba. So it's a very cryptic kind of midrash. Basically, what Rabbi Levi says is that anyone who is Mikayem, who fulfills the mitzvah of Sukkah in this world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is because, or the fact that he fulfilled the mitzvah of Sukkah, I'm going to kind of cover him, or Masich, like the Lashon Schach, I'm going to put upon him, and like kind of, I guess shadow him with a Chamato Shel Yom Haba, with the sunlight of next day. So it's a very, like I said, it's very cryptic. The question that the Zera Shimshon asks, I should have introduced it with a famous, the Sukkah is known for many, many things, but we know the Gemara mentions and the Zohar mentions several times that the Sukkah is called Tzila D'mei Emunuta, the shadow of Emunah. And there are many, many stories. One that I know of, the Tiferet, I think it's the Tiferet Shlomo. I think that's his name. The Sefer. Yodomsker. Yeah, he's mentioned as one of the segulas that he says for people who are sick, lo aleinu, is to literally sit in the sukkah the entire week. Don't leave. He actually told one of his he actually told one of his Hasidim to do that, and according to the story, that was what saved them. I can't necessarily say that for a fact, but I could say that there are many people who say that you should do as much as you can in the sukkah, whether it's eat, sleep. If you have to work, you work in there. If you're gonna, I know there's one person who brought their treadmill once into their sukkah, so they can actually do, whatever they can do.
My father-in-law. Isn't that disrespectful though to sukkah?
No, it's not disrespectful, because you would do anything that you want. Anything you would do when you live in a house. What would you do in your house? You would work out. So anyway, it's an important statement, an important introduction. We'll get to it in a second as to why. So this is also I think this Torah, short Torah, is a very good idea of what we should have in mind when we're sitting in the sukkah, whether we say all the extra things before, during, or after. But I think if we have this in mind when we go into sukkahs tomorrow night, I think we'll be already a great level of new level of kiyum of the mitzvah of the sukkah. So it says, "Kashem ma'u lashon hazeh amar Kadosh Baruch Hu kiyem mitzvah sukkah." Right? Usually when the Gemara or when a Midrash says anyone who fulfills it, right? It's, in other words, that's the way you say Kol HaMekayem et zeh, or anyone who fulfills it, well, Hashem promises this. Anyone who keeps Shabbat, even if the person was of Oved Avodah Zarah, will get this, right? All these that's usually the style of the phrase. Like the phrase usually goes, anyone who does this, Hashem promises this. What's this? All of a sudden, it's saying he fulfilled it, and therefore I'm going to do this. Right, it's not the usual terminology. So the Zera Shimshon generally picks up on two things that are almost always the case with his questions. Or one is linguistic changes that are not normal, and the other one is if it is abnormal, then we have to understand why. So when he goes with psukim, usually with psukim, he says what's wrong with this pasuk, and he starts to analyze it. And in this case, he's saying is what's wrong with this midrash? Right, what's going on here? The style is wrong, or style is off. And then he says, the second question is, Lama lo amar kol yoshev b'sukkah, right? Why does he say the person who has fulfilled the mitzvah, not say whoever sits in the sukkah, which is the mitzvah itself, is to yoshev b'sukkah. So he says, why does it say fulfill the mitzvah, not sit in the sukkah? And what does it say is ba'olam hazeh, right? why does it say in the Midrash? If you look at the top of the Torah, it says Ani masich alav mechamato shel yom haba, like the next day, right? And he says ba'olam hazeh, right? So he says, what does that mean? You should do it in this day. We never do any of the mitzvot we do to get, to kind of benefit ourselves for tomorrow. That's never the point of the mitzvah, is because we were commanded to do it. It wasn't this idea that, we were told to do it today, so therefore we're going to do it. It was not like, because we're promised something tomorrow, we're going to do it today. That's not how we do things. Is that how the Art Scroll translates it?
Sorry, say again. Can you explain that one more time?
Yeah, so question number one is the whole idea of this. It's not the normal style of whoever fulfills mitzvah X gets Hashem promises Y. Question two is, why does it say whoever fulfills the mitzvah, not whoever sits in the mitzvah? That's question number two. And question three is, why does it say ba'olam hazeh? Right? It shouldn't be. We already know that all the mitzvot are meant to be done today, meaning in olam hazeh. So why would we be told to do it today in olam hazeh? What's the other option? Do we have another choice? Right? There's no, right? So he says, "V'yesh lavin shesoda sukahu lachnia lachlish koach hasitracha v'lilit kmo she'arachnu le'el b'parshat vayira al pasuk v'ishanu tacharetz." Now, if you go into that Torah, it's a very long Torah, but Hashem, basically, Avram Avinu. And we're going to get to him, and as he mentions at the end, he goes in Torah Yud Chet, which is another amazing Torah. He basically says is that the whole idea of Sukkah is to completely suppress, completely weaken all of the negative forces that are around us. Now, one of the things that we know about one of the reasons why, and it's not mentioned here, but one of the reasons why Sukkot comes right after Yom Kippur, which would be to easily celebrate Sukkot any time of year, because it celebrates the fact that we sit in these huts all year round, right? So if that's the case, so we could have celebrated any time of year. So one of the reasons that they say is because after Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you need another, and he's going to mention it later. He's going to mention an idea that I think is a really good idea. But he says it's basically after being on this high, right? We want to make sure that we stay there. So we have like a little bit of a break, and then we go to, and like we're still scared that the forces we're so high. So the easiest thing for us is when we're on such a high to fall. So we go into the sukkah and say, okay, protect us again. Hashem, we trust you even more. Protect us. So that's what he's saying is even that alone, just to go into say this is what we're going to the sukkah, is not just to put our trust in Hashem, which is enough, which is also to say is that we want to make sure that the forces that were around us we're being protected, and we're trying to suppress them as much as possible. He says another thing we know is that the Segula of Yemei Chag, that is the 7 days of Sukkot, is to suppress the Rishaim. It says Saviv, meaning when we're encircled by going through, if we're encircled with the mitzvah of Sukkah all the time, then we'll be protected as we go through our day against the Rishaim, the evil people or evil forces. כמו שבשביל זה אנו עושים הקפות בלולב, ובשעת המקדש היו מקריבים 70 פרים, בנוסח המים הרמוז יבוזו לו, in the Zohar. Okay, so but without going into the Zohar, he basically says there are many things that we do on Sukkot, that whether that's the hakafot, whether it's sitting in the sukkah, whether it's the bulls, the sacrifices. There's a lot of things that we do that kind of reminisce that if you look at the reasons why we do shake the lulav. Shake the lulav is to get rid of the evil forces. The main Gemara. So why do we shake the lulav this way and this way? It says, and it's similar to what we do when tahanafata omer. When you move the omer, when you're waving the meal offering, you're doing it up, down, up, all to the different sides. Why? To get rid of the evil forces. So he says that basically this whole idea is that we're encircling ourselves with these, amazing things, and the idea is to protect us, basically to protect us in some way from these outside external forces.
So what's the command for Hashem in all directions?
It is partially that, but if you look at the Gemara doesn't mention at all the idea that we recognize Hashem as all directions. That's a nice idea, but the main Gemara reason is basically the way where we learn it from is from Omer, and the Omer just says Holechu Movi, which is basically what we do. We go up, down, side to side, and it says basically to, if I recall correctly, it's to get rid of the I have to look it up, but I believe it's to get rid of the evil forces. It doesn't mention the Hashem in all directions. Now, it's Zidrach, Rishai, whatever you want to call it. It's all these different things. If someone wants to take a look at that, we could do it. But basically, the idea is that it's this constant idea of why do we do the Shivat, the 70 bulls, Nisuch Hamayim, is all these things that we're doing are to make sure that we're kind of protecting ourselves from the evil forces. Umeata lo amar kol yoshev b'sukkah lefi shekol Yisrael yoshvim b'sukkah aval inam mechabdim l'sod hasukkah b'ma shetzarich lechavin b'otam yamim. So he says now we understand why it says why it doesn't say lashevet, but why it does the midrash doesn't say leshiv b'sukkah. It says the person it's because most people, everyone sits in the sukkah. But if we just this little hint alone, it's just like I said, these two lines alone, but they're not mechavein, right? They're usually saying is, well, Hashem commanded us to do it. That's it. Great, wonderful. We're sitting in the sukkah. He says but most people are not with the intent, with the kavanah, whatever kavanah means, is when we go in there, what you say is, okay, I'm sitting in here to really protect myself now and moving forward for the entire year from the evil forces, right? So if I'm really going into that idea, when I sit in the sukkah, yes, I get the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah by just sitting there. But when I really want to, what's my intent at the end of the day? Yeah.
With the Ushpizin, the individuals that come, they're there to strengthen us.
Yeah.
And if we take that one step further and have them with us all year round, then there's no question that we can overcome the
Absolutely.
and protect
Absolutely.
us
Absolutely.
from all the evil.
It's even more so. He doesn't mention the Ushpizin here. He mentions the Ushpizin, I believe, next in Yud Chet. I believe we always had. It's good. Baruch Shekivanta. It's great. So you have the kavanah already. You understand what it means to have the kavanah. So he says is if I had to say is like tomorrow I'm going to probably do is we're going to print out these two sentences. Kol mekavein. Right. It says here. We have to. Everyone sits in the sukkah and maybe makes a bracha and gets the check. Gets the credit for that. But they don't necessarily have the kavanah of really
doing so much more.
Right, we could do so much more. Exactly. So yes, we are. So that's to me is like the main. And that's why it says. It says V'lachen amar Rabbi Levi kol mi shemekayem mitzvah sukkah dahinu shemechaven ba lachlish koach hasitra achla v'lachbir chelak hakdusha b'olam hazeh af al pi she'uzman shlita lechitzoni. He says this is the time that when we're sitting. First of all, is at night. Second of all, is the entire Sukkot holiday is a time when. That the Sitra Achra and the negative forces are very strong, and he says that's why Rabbi Levi says it's Kol Mishakayem Mitzvah Sukkah Dahinu, that he's actually meaning he has intent, and he focuses on the idea of suppressing and controlling, and he uses the other word is to lachnia, is to really suppress, really until to weaken, subdue. That's a good word. Subdue the evil forces. When we look at it from that, meaning that's our biggest challenge in this world. So if we really go into the sukkah and saying that's what we want to do, and if you look in the Yehi Ratzon and some of the other tefillot that we look at that are said throughout, each day before you go into the sukkah, you can look at the tefillot. So a lot of them are, make sure that it protected me from all these different things. There's so many different tefillot that many Hasidim say. Some have minhag to say a parak of Shir Hashirim per day, again to show our love for Hashem, to make sure that we remember what's going on here. But either which way, the kavanah is he be'emet shleimut k'moshe kavanah zo he be'emet shleimut mitzvah sukkah amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu kiyem mitzvah sukkah klomar hu kiven lachlish. He says that's why it says that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu says is he fulfilled, right? Hu kiyem means that he fulfilled it. In other words, he had intent to weaken and to subdue the mikatrigim, the negative forces. Mishum hacha midah kinegida ani masich alav v'chulei. Dainu kedusha tiyeh sochechet alav shachitzonim lo yikatrugu. So he says
He wasn't just Yoshev.
right. He was right. Exactly. Right. So in other words, once you understand that it's not just be mikayim the mitzvah, but rather I'm saying is I have in mind to really take the energy that's coming out of the sukkah, meaning what's the whole goal of the mitzvah of the sukkah is to not just dwell, but rather to be protected from now and for the rest of the year. Then that is the real mitzvah. That's the real kavanah of what we should have.
The mitzvah without by sitting in sukkah, there's not enough mitzvah. You have to do something.
Right. So you make it. So the truth is, the answer is not necessarily. That's why we
just sit in the sukkah.
Yeah, it says Teshvu Kein Taduru, right? You sit in your house. You don't just by sitting in your house, you're not becoming mitzvah per se, but you're protecting from the outside, from the outside elements.
The Torah doesn't tell us exactly how to wear tefillin or what they look like, right? So
right.
The Rabbanan to tell us how to wear tefillin, what they look like.
Right. So he says, right? Yes, you should make a bracha on it.
So the way to actual fulfillment of sukkah is actually
Sitting.
doing something that actually is
Right.
reminiscent to sukkahs.
Right, so that would be you sit, you dwell in it. But he's saying is yes, we can dwell in it, but then there's also dwelling it with intent. So dwelling it with it is one thing, right? I can live in my house, and I can live my entire life in my house without having to have in mind what's the goal of my house. Is it to be a Torah house? Is it to keep Shabbos? Is it to pray? I can just sit there because I want to have 4 walls over my head, so I don't have to worry a house and a roof. That's one way to look at the mitzvah. The other one to say is, what am I really looking to do out of this mitzvah? What am I really trying to pull it out? And he says, it's the simple, again, whatever he really means here, I have no idea, but what can I pull out of this is that we're trying to go into Sukkot tomorrow night when we say the mitzvah of Leishev et Sukkot. It's not just to sit in it, but it's also to say is, I want to make sure that it's protecting me, and I take this protection throughout the entire year. So,
I think he's also saying, like, you should have in mind the
Yeah.
kavanah.
Yeah.
There's the level of consciousness. Like, yeah, you can be dwelling, right? But you could also be like
Right.
utilizing
Right.
just by having in mind
Right, so that's
that this is what it's
Well,
capable of
that's
doing.
why Charles wanted to start with this one. Now, this one is like a mini version of what the next one, which is Yud Chet. So if I had to say this alone would be amazing, but if we go to the next one, which is Yud Chet 18, which is to me an amazing expansion of what we just did. It's a great one. It's a little bit longer, but it explains it a little bit more. And we're gonna.
What's the one you're doing after that? Yud?
The one after that is Yud. The Yud one. If you don't do Yud, Yud Chet is great. If we don't get to Yud, it's amazing. It's okay. The Yud. But the Zera Shimshon on the Arba Minim is an amazing idea. So hopefully B'ezrat Hashem will have time to do it all. But let's do Yud Chet. We'll start with Yud Chet. So Yud Chet is, it's based on, it goes back to Avram Avinu. So, and this is something that I've never heard of it, like putting it together like this, but to me, it makes total sense, obviously, after looking at it. So he says here, the Midrash Rabbah on Parshat Vayera, it says is, Yukach Namat Maim. That's the story of when Avram meets the angels / whatever, travelers, whatever you want to call them. And he says, take a little bit of water and sit outside and sit in the tree. The Midrash says, Kol ma she'asa Avram Avinu lo malachim asa Kadosh Baruch Hu levanav shalosh pamim bamidbar ba'aretz v'la'atid. So the Midrash says, this is not me. The Midrash says that whatever Avram Avinu did to these malachim, Hashem paid. He said, okay, you did this to the malachim. I'm going to do it to Bnei Israel once in the Midbar, once in the land of Israel, and once in the future. Okay. Avram Amar Vishanu Tachadetz, Akadosh Baruch Hu Para Levanav Bamidbar, Ki Basukot Teshavti Bnei Israel, Ba'aretz Minayin, Basukot Teshu Teshivat Yamim, Latid Minayin, Shneimar Basukat Yeh Latzel Yomam V'chule. So the Midrash says, here's how. Let me break it down for you. Avram said to his malachim, sit underneath this tree. Hashem said, okay, underneath the tree, Basukot Teshu, but you're going to sit in the Midbar. When you're in the Midbar, in the Midbar, he says, I sat. Why do we fulfill them? How do we know that we fulfill that? Where do we live? It says Ki Basukot Shavti Bnei Israel. When we were traveling, they lived in Sukkot. That's in the Midbar. Eretz Yisrael. It says Basukot Teshvu. We have a commandment when we're in Eretz Yisrael to sit in the Sukkah 7 days. And then in the future, based on a pasuk in Yeshayahu, it says Basukah. The Sukkah, meaning this hut or whatever it is, Tiel Latzel Yomam. It will be for them a shade. It will be for them a protection. Right? Tzel doesn't have to only mean a shade, which is like sun versus shade. It also can mean a protection. In this case, most likely. What? That I think he's saying more. Obviously, the ideal scenario was Eretz Yisrael versus Chutz La'aretz. So the ideal scenario is for us to be in Eretz Yisrael. So the fact that that people are in Galut right now is not necessarily the ideal, as we know. So he's saying is that we fulfilled the mitzvah. At least Hashem commanded the mitzvah or did it. That it reflects once in the Midbar, once in Eretz Yisrael, and once in.
What were you saying about a tree?
A tree. So it says Avram tells these three travelers, okay, you want to go, welcome to my, little area. Take some water and sit under the tree. So he says, sit under the tree. The Midrash here says because he told them to sit under a tree, Hashem told them, okay, you're going to sit and I'm going to protect you from with the sukkah. That's what he says. Now, again, that's one of the questions. Your face tells me that you have a question as to sukkah, tree. How do we get to put the pieces together? Like
It's also interesting because a sukkah not kosher if it's under it.
Exactly. So he doesn't get into that question as much as he's saying is what's going on. As more of the question is like what's going on here, like because Avram made them sit under a tree, or welcomed them to gave them some shade. So now, what's the kesher? So he says very simple. Makshim ha'olam halo lo asa ela pam echat bilvad. Dahainu b'midbar shekifam b'nei Yaakov omnam ba'aretz lo asa klum ela shitziva lehem. Right. So he said the question number one he says is let's ask even a simpler question is the question is Hashem told them in Eretz, when he told them to go do it in the Midbar, it was clearly for a practical reason. You guys have to live somewhere. We want to protect you. But when you're in Eretz Yisrael, it's not a special thing that Hashem told them to do, right? Hashem told them you have to sit in the sukkah. It's not because Avram Avinu did something. Rather, it's to remember what you did in Eretz in the Midbar. So it wasn't that Hashem said, I'm giving you a practical, kind of application of what Abraham did. It's more of just like saying you should do it to remember.
Right.
So that one doesn't
You're
have
not doing sukkahs now because you should have a shaded hut.
Exactly. It's not. There's not really a connection. It's a nice idea to say that it happens in a number of threes, but it's not necessarily the. Look at this guy. Oh my guy. Okay. He's trying to. All right. Anyway.
There was no sukkah. There was an covered.
Right.
The whole thing is.
So that's one of the questions as well. So he says like this. Okay. We're going to take a quick. I'm not pausing. I'm just going to say a little.
Is it saying, by any chance, is it saying that since Avram offered the shade of the tree, then maybe Hashem gave these miraculous huts in the desert for shade?
That's exactly what he
Because
said.
where did they get these huts?
Right. Exactly. So he's going to get to that point. It's exactly. I mean, within a certain way, that's what he's saying basically. So. And then he says, let's just say, so he says let's just say that this mitzvah was because of Avram Avinu, right? Because Avram Avinu said, sit under this tree. Does it make any sense to say that only this mitzvah was because of Avram, like in the merit of Avram Avinu? Avram Avinu was the forefather of the entire Jewish religion.
He introduced Achnos Sorochem.
Right, he introduced Achnos Sorochem, but he also introduced us the entire Torah. Like we can't say that this mitzvah is parallel to Avram, like corresponds to what Avram did. Everything that Avram did was kind of a representation and not parallel to what was going on. So he says here, as he quotes a pasuk on a midrash robber, he says, "Lakachat matanot b'adam shi Torah b'zchut Avram Avinu." In other words, all the gifts that we have, meaning the Torah and everything else, is because of Avram Avinu. Right?
Well, it is possible that sukkah is different.
Yeah, he's going to get.
Meaning, it's not a kasha so much as a shaila. Meaning, what's different about either what's different about sukkah or what is it that we mean?
Right.
What is it that we mean? That meaning, can I get meaning the way that Abraham maybe did this? So then we get sukkah. It's like, we get everything, right?
Right. So it's right. So he's asking. It's nice to say that it's midah kinami midah, but like you said, everything. Avram Avinu established everything. The whole Torah is because of Avram Avinu.
No, but I think in Chassidus, in this especially, Chesed, Avram is referred to as Chesed, Yitzchak is referred to as Gvura, and
right.
Yitzchak is...
So he mentions the Chesed part a little bit later on. It's definitely part of the idea is that his love and his passion for mitzvot definitely comes... Right. So he gets to something like that. But the whole question is really, he says is, why is this mitzvah of Sukkah so distinct that they kind of say, because Avraham Avinu put them under a tree or invited them to sit under a tree, we have the mitzvah of Sukkah. What's so unique about it? Because Avraham Avinu could be easily viewed as the forefather of all the Torah, and therefore it's, what's so special about this? Why does it stand out? Right.
Also, telling someone to hang out under a tree is a very small detail.
Right.
But it's actually very big and very thoughtful.
Right. But so is giving water, and so is all the other things that we could easily say is, well, why don't we have, some other mitzvah that we have to. Achnas Orachim never does. By the way, Achnas Orachim is a nice thing to do. It's a mitzvah, no question. But never does the Torah say you should bring people into your home or. Right. It's like one of these unstated things. That's a nice thing to do. It's but it's never like it's a mitzvah. No one's questioning.
Well, that's his next kasha, right? He says you only did it. Really, he only gave us would be a kabod in the midbar, but in Eretz Yisrael, he never did that for us. He just commanded us to do it for ourselves.
Right.
Sukkah, right? That's his kasha.
Yeah, but he commanded us to do the sukkah as a reminder to us.
But that's very different than him doing it for us.
Right.
That's the whole thing. The Zera Shimshon, when he brings the Medrash, the Medrash says that Hashem, just as Abraham Avinu did for the Malachim, so Hashem is going to do for us. But he didn't do for us. He did for us in the Midbar. He didn't do for us in Eretz Yisrael. He just commanded us to do for ourselves.
No, of course he did it for us in Eretz Israel.
That's not what the Zera Shimshon
No,
says.
the
Don't
Zera-
take it with me.
right.
I'm just reading in the daf.
Not
The mitzvah of Sukkot was to remember what we did in the Midbar.
Okay.
So in the Midbar, no one's questioned that the nace was there.
But the same idea of protection in the Midbar was the tree that protected
Right.
the individuals, the same tree that, not the same tree, but the tree that
Was a
protected
tent.
Yonah.
Right. But the
no,
point is-
yeah, Yonah.
So what's-
But
That's
what
very- that's not-
he's asking the question, what he's saying is, the Zera Shimshon is asking kind of 2 or 3 questions. One question is, what's so special about why Avraham Avinu, why are we just taking this mitzvah and saying this is the mitzvah that, because Avraham Avinu gave us all the Torah, basically, right? That's one question, more specifically Sukkah. Second question is, the Midrash clearly states that Hashem promised that he will give us levels, in threes. Mitzvah 1 will be in the Midbar, Mitzvah 2 will be in Eretz Yisrael, and Mitzvah 3 will be the same version of that mitzvah, or kind of like applications of that mitzvah will be in the future, meaning in the time of Mashiach. In the time of the Midbar, there's no question, we got the Sukkah, we were protected, etc. In the Midbar, in Eretz Yisrael, it wasn't that Hashem protected us with the Sukkah.
Well, he did. In a way, he did. The Beit HaMikdash.
Right, but he's talking about the Sukkah Mamash in this case.
He's talking about a Nina Kabbalah.
Right.
We didn't get,
Right, but he's saying-
etc. We didn't get that in Eretz Yisrael.
In Eretz Yisrael, he just says that you have a mitzvah to sit in the Sukkah, but you don't have I'm not protecting you as I did in the Midbar. I'm just telling you, you have to sit in a Sukkah in Eretz Yisrael because I did it in the Midbar. It's different than saying is, in the Midbar, I protected you. There's a huge difference with saying is, when the Midrash says, the Midrash says,
But we didn't need the another covenant in Eretz Yisrael.
we didn't need it, but
Doesn't
then.
matter. It's
so-
just he's going to be Mida Keneged Mida.
Right,
That's
so
the
the-
Medrash.
the
So it doesn't matter
Midrash-
if we need it or not. Hashem didn't do it. It's
Right,
the
right. The
point of
question is, Hashem never did in Eretz Yisrael. Hashem just told us, you got to do it. That's also, okay, then if we have to do it, we'll do it. But don't say that Hashem, don't come back and say, Hashem said Midah Keneged because Midah Keneged Midah, because Abraham did it, and therefore I'm going to do it for you. Yes, I'm not doing it for you. I'm just telling you you have to do it.
Everything that we do,
It's because Hashem said it. Yeah.
not only that, but is a remembrance of what Hashem did for us. That's why we have the 6 remembrances every single day.
Yes.
But we can agree there's a difference between us building a sukkah and Hashem bringing down clouds of
No.
glory upon us. There's no
There's no
difference between
difference.
us building one sukkah and Hashem bringing down clouds of glory on us.
No, because we're remembering. Hashem wants us to
Okay.
continue.
Okay, so- okay.
Versus using
So-
mamish building for
Yeah, that's why, because we have to remember.
That is entirely different.
It's one is saying,
You didn't do that for
maybe
us,
I'll make the
so-
distinction a little clearer. One is saying Hashem is actively doing something to remember, to recall that what Abraham Avinu did. Okay, actively doing that would be no question. Actively doing would be the Midbar. Okay. Now the other one is saying Hashem says is in the Midrash, according to the Midrash. It's not me saying it. The Midrash is saying is Hashem says I'm going to do is because you to commemorate what Abraham, the 3 things that Abraham did. I'm going to do them 3 times in 3 different time periods. Once in the Midbar, once in Eretz Yisrael, and once in the future. In the Midbar, no question, Hashem protected us with the Sukkah, whether it's a real Sukkah or not, it doesn't make a difference at this point. Second point is in Eretz Yisrael, he never gave us like the protection that he get, like the Sukkah that he did in the Midbar. We didn't have an akavah for sure. We remember. He told us to remember it. However, it's not the same as saying it as the distinction is in the words. Okay, Hashem says, "I am going to do something for you to commemorate that which Avraham Avinu did."
And then you have to do it.
And then right, and the other one is in the mitzvah of the Midbar and the mitzvah of Eretz Yisrael is you have to sit in a sukkah for 7 days. That's not me telling you I'm protecting you. It's saying is you have to do something, right?
You have to remember.
You have to remember, but it's not the same as saying is I'm actively giving you the ananei kavod. That's the difference. What he's asking is it's like a fine-tuned question. One is Hashem actively giving us something, and the other one is I have to do something, meaning me, man, has to do something, and therefore because I'm doing something, it's as if Hashem is doing, but the distinction is in the words. It's like a nuance. Okay, that's what he's asking now. Now. He asked. There is a Tur Bareket, which is he mentions it here. He says the Tur Bareket. I looked it up. It's a very unique way of. He also says something similar to what we said before, which is basically because we're being surrounded of mitzvah. plus minus. It's a longer piece of, but it's a unique sefer written. I want to say even in the 1500s or maybe even earlier. So I'm not going to go into that for now. So he says, and this is one of what I was referring to earlier in the previous in Torah Yud Aleph. He says is one of the reasons why do we go out to the Sukkah right after Yom Kippur? Maybe our punishment, what is it? What we could say is, and this is what based on the Midrash, he says it based on Midrash Shal Kuchimoni. It says, why do we do it right after Yom Kippur? Because maybe our deen, maybe our judgment for Eretz Yisrael is that we have for Bnei Israel is that we have to go out to Galut, right? We have to go out to exile. We have to be, our punishment is we go to exile. So Hashem says, good, you want to go to exile? Let's make it. Or Bnei Israel said, we want to go to exile. Let's go to our sukkah. We'll exile our home, ki'ilu like a galut, but we're still being protected because Hashem is saying is, go out of your normal comfort zone. Go into a place that's foreign to you, that's not familiar to you with whatever it is, but I'll still protect you, right? So that's one answer. Okay, that's one answer. So he says that's one option. Okay, he says we have a great. If we look at it from that perspective, then he says then there's an amazing value to what we're doing in the sukkah. It's not that we're just going out because Hashem commanded it, is because we want to kind of recreate or symbolize, if you will, the galut aspect of our comforts of our home to go out into the sukkah, which is not our comfort, and says this is ki'ilu, instead of being harshly judged, we're going out.
Well, it's like instead of us getting kicked out of Eretz Yisrael,
right.
Gullus, like Hashem, our Gullus is going to be in the sukkah.
Right. Exactly.
It's still a negative spin on sukkah.
It's still a negative spin. So far, it's still a negative spin.
Well, you could say
that?
it's positive.
I would like to.
Yeah, because I'll
Right.
deny that I'm being punished and I have to go into Gullus. So
Right.
sukkah will save me. I don't have to go into.
Right. So
I don't have to go live in Florida. I can live in my
It still
sukkah.
stands.
right. It's still.
So it's
That
saving
there
me.
is
He's still
a
saying.
connotation that
Right,
is
what
not
Zeb is-
exactly positive.
Right. But he's saying.
It's
Right.
not cotton candy, but it's
No,
it's saving
for-
me.
Right.
Because
Right.
if you didn't have
He's
sukkah,
saying this
you'd
is.
be
Right.
Means to an end, great.
He's saying is I'd rather be sitting in a sukkah than going out to real gullus, but it's still saying is that the sukkah is like
I'd still rather be in the sukkah and only
Sure.
a
Right.
positive, like.
Yeah, you don't want
Right.
to. You don't want to buy Gullus.
So
Like,
that's one option.
It's sukkah.
So that's one option. So
Why bring any negativity into it?
that's one option. Now the other thing is, now he says like this. This is This is where he really expands on Torah Yud Aleph. Yeah, Madeline's is a place in Far Zion. It's one of the best, probably best French places, right? Yeah. Anyways, Madeline's. Anyways, shameless plug. I happen to love the place. The guy's great.
Sponsor Zera Shimshon.
Anyways, he's a great guy, a really hard worker, an amazing guy. The real deal French. You go in there, you smell the butter all over the place. He's amazing. Yeah, I know.
This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
a new place?
No, it's not. It's been around for a while. And every time I go in there, I feel like yeah. I don't think so.
That was the place that used to be part of.
Madeline, I think that's right, Madeline. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, so it says V'od yesh lomar sheyadua shesaviv reshaim yitalchun.
Or they may have told them privately.
Oh,
What? This isn't part of this economy?
all right. You have a hate to say next year. Right? Just write it down. It's okay. We all make these kind of mistakes.
I just have to say I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so he says here, V'od yesh lomar sheyadua shesaviv reshaim yitalchun. Mitzvat sukkah.
You gotta say voice. When this happens, you gotta say voice.
Yeah, let's go, guys. Guys, get up, wake up. Okay, so he says here another answer besides what we just said about the galut, which is we said is not necessarily the most positive. So he says here the pasuk in Tehillim says Saviv Reshaim Yitalchun. Around the Reshaim we will walk. Mitzvat Sukkah Sodah, meaning the secret behind that, what the mitzvah sukkah, like we said earlier in Torah Yud Aleph, he says is La'agein alenu misonenu min hamazikim min sarei ha'umot. So he says to protect us. The secret of sukkah is to protect us. Kadesh niyeh mukafim b'sukat shalom. Right, we'll be protected from the sukkah of peace. That's why we go around like he said before. We said before he said it shortly. Right, right. As we say in the pasuk, so basically, he's saying is there's many things that we do on sukkahs. All of these things, the circles that we do, we even dance in circles, right? Like when we dance, in general, we dance in a circle. We go around the mizbech or the bima in circles. That we sit. We're trying to protect ourselves as many times as possible within Sukkot to protect ourselves from the outside forces. And v'zo hayta mamash kavanat Avraham. This is what Avram was having in mind. Shamar lem hishanu tachat eitz. When he said to them, sit underneath the tree, di lavachi kamash melan kral. Like, we don't understand. Like, demach patlan v'dati moshivan tachat eitz or makom acher u'may umed deit zeh. So he says, we have to understand that the reason why Avram said to these malachim, sit under the tree, like, who cares where they sat? Like, if we don't think about it this way, there's the fact that he told them to sit under the tree, he could have told them to go sit on the park bench. It makes no difference to us, right? He's saying is that the tree, the fact that they were encircled, that he was protected, right? In other words, he's protecting himself. If you Avram was saying is, you sit under the tree, sit for some shade. It sounds nice to sit under for some shade, but I'm really saying is, you sit there, I'll be over here. I'm going to go take care of what's going on in the tent. Right? He's saying is like, the idea is that, he says, Di lavachi kamash melan kra. Like, otherwise, what was going on here? Yishanu tachat eitz. Like, why does it make a difference where he told them to sit? So he's saying is that he wants them to sit under the tree to kind of be protected from these forces. Because again, at this point, Avram doesn't know that they were malachim. Right? Now, besides what we know that the Chazal, he quotes the Zohar, but in other places as well, that they look like Aravim, they look like strangers. Whether Aravim means literally Arabs or strangers or whatever. He says, "If they So he says it's actually not to protect Avraham in that regard. Sit on the tree, and I'm standing over here. But rather, he's saying is sit under the tree so that we of course these Aravim these strangers were clearly encircled with evil or negative forces. And he's saying is I want you to separate yourself. In other words, you're surrounded, so sit under this tree, so that way you're protected from. In other words, this tree that I sit under or whatever it is. Sit under the tree so that way you're protected too, right? So he's turning the tree into like a mini version of a sukkah. Now, like you asked a question about the tree, a sukkah under a tree is possible, but he's saying is that the idea is that actually one time I was in the Moshav, I forgot who it was. I was in the Moshav once for Shabbos, or a couple of times for Shabbos, and one time we had lunch under a willow tree. Like this, basically they cut out the tree. So like underneath the tree, you sit underneath there, and you felt like you were in like this little hut. You ever see like if you go to like someplace in Africa, also they have it like you can literally they carve out like these massive trunks, and you can sit underneath there, whatever it is. So he's saying is that Avram would do lacheno shivam tachat ha'etz akadosh shezeh eitz yisuvavam mikol hatzadim v'yakivotam v'yagem alehem me'arash lo yishlot od b'hem. So he's saying this is why you sat under the tree, this holy tree, right? Otherwise, why does the pasuk have to tell us? Why he told him to sit under a tree? What's the difference? Ishanu tachat ha'etz, the tree. So what the Zera Shimshon is picking up, at least the way I understand it, is he's saying is Avram Avinu was telling them sit underneath this tree specifically because this tree is holy, meaning it has some sort of special
maybe it's like
protection.
The tree that Avram
whatever
under.
Whatever it is, I don't know what he quotes the Zohar, so you can only imagine where the Zohar goes with that. And I'm not a Kabbalist, so I don't know, but I would imagine that the Zohar is saying that there's. I didn't look at the Zohar per se, but I would imagine that it is definitely something to do with the fact, like you said, either daven there or there was something special that was done, and therefore there was obviously a very strong force underneath that tree, and therefore he says, sit there, and underneath this tree, you're protected.
I'm a little confused with the two shitas. So what's the difference whether they're Arivim or whether they're?
If they were Malachim, then they don't need the protection.
That's no sheet of Avraham, right? It's either if Arvim,
right, which means that they were definitely strangers, Arabs, meaning that they were walking around with negative forces surrounding them.
No, but that's the word on Nachrim. That's the second shot already, right?
No, he's saying. Right. The Tzarich Lomar Lefi. No. Right. Oh, it's right. So
that's the second shot. I'm not understanding what's different about his perception of them. Whether they're Arabs or whether they're not.
That's it's a good distinction. So I think so he says like this. Right.
If we're so rushed to go from your kippur into Sukkot, why don't we prepare the Sukkot before your kippur and actually go the next day? Go next day to Sukkot. Why do you have Sukkot right immediately?
So that's a good point. Meaning as opposed to a 4-day break.
Yeah. Why do we have to? How are you going to have to?
So one of the answers that it takes, first of all, it takes time to come back from off the, you just got off this being completely clean, right? It's hard to go from being completely clean to the next mitzvah, which is meant to be, you just spent 40 days. Let's put it this way: you just spent 40 days investing in all this.
Shlomo just shared this beautiful
teaching
by Rav Kook.
Yeah, I didn't hear that
That
one.
was, you're on such a neshama high from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Right.
It's like your goof will suffer.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, this is like consolation.
Right. Your goof, your body desperately needs like some sort of like a chill day kind of thing. Right. So there's a lot of
we're very, very busy, but it's still like
you need some time to like quote unquote decompress. That sounds negative, but it's
to come back to earth.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why we have Sukkah, which is literally earth, like all this fabric materials. Right. Come back to the physical. It's not necessarily the best answer, but that's my al-regular answer. Now he says here, now we can understand.
Oh, it's just, sorry, I was just
Yeah.
thinking. No, it's just one shot. It's all one shot.
Okay, fine. So it sounds like it's two. You're right, because it says it says here, it says be'im. It sounds like there's like meaning that the alternative is the other. Right.
So
but he's saying it's one.
No,
They're both Tomei cases.
Right.
It's only one case.
Right.
Right.
But
this or this, they're both coming from the other side.
Right.
He wanted to put them under the tree to protect them.
Right.
It's all.
So now he says, now we can understand very clearly why Bnei Israel were told in the Midbar why they were encircled on Anei Kavod, and why he gave them the commandment of Sukkah, and why he told them that in the future you will have this Sukkah, is because Avram Avinu said, in merit or in the zchut, because of what Avram Avinu did, said is you're walking around with negative forces around you. Sit under this tree, you're protected. Now Hashem says, okay, Avram Avinu protected these people who are foreigners. Now for now and forever, 3 times, Midbar, Eretz Yisrael, and in the future you're going to always be protected. And that's the commandment is to be encircled around so that you're walking around with protection. Now this is again, it just takes the previous Torah which we did, which is like a short version of this, to the next level, which is to say really the deep what's going on here, Avram Avinu, how do we connect it all? Now he says we'll see how he says here like this. Which goes back to Yud Aleph. That's why we know he kind of goes back and forth referring to each other. So he says here, now we can understand another part of what the Midrash said in Ot Yud Aleph, which is what we did originally. So that makes sense why Charles told us to do Yud Aleph first and then Yud Chet. Even the Zera Shimshon tells us to do it, so good for him. So he says here, "So il sheikar mitzvahu kadesh tagen alinu musonenu mikol davar ra da'ahinu shatzel hakadosh kifenu shmenu lifamim chas v'shalom ena davar ken sha'asha chatzufa or avnot gormim." So he says this is one other reason why the main mitzvah is to protect us, right? One of the reasons, because the main mitzvah of Sukkah is for protection from all of the evil things that are going around us. Right, and that the protection of Hashem, the shadow of Hashem, will always protect us, right? Sometimes, right, sometimes we can't, right? Sometimes we can't. So it says, "Lachen amar kol mi shemekayem mitzvah sukkah dahainu liftach b'Hashem shezchut mizazo yesh lakoach lagen alav af al pi shoresh lefamim en davar ken." So he says the previous midrash we said is that anyone who keeps the mitzvah observes the mitzvah, and he says, what does that mean? Observes the mitzvah. So he's saying is right. If you look, remember the midrash said there's kol mishek mikayem mitzvah sukazo. So he says here, who kiyem mitzvah sukazo, right? And we said last time is that the sukkah, the whole goal of the sukkah is to protect us from the outside forces. But sometimes we walk around in these places, we're just like, how am I protected if I'm walking around in who knows where, right? Or God forbid, sometimes we can't control where we are, whatever it is, we're out and about, whatever it is. So he says it's not that you are literally, you always, he says the whole point is that hu kiyem means that, yes, I go into the sukkah having in mind that this is what I'm protected from. But even at the times when I feel exposed and I feel like I'm out of control or I can't do something, I think about the sukkah. The sukkah is with me. I think I have the emunah that's why it's called tzila de me'emuta. The tzel of Hashem is saying is, yes, I'm in a place where I shouldn't be or I can't control being here because whatever reason, the sukkah is still with me. Right, the tzel is still with me. I feel that hu kiyem means I'm observing. I'm taking it with me. Right, I can give you a very good example. Recently, I was on a business trip. and I was just like in this place. First of all, the most boring city I've ever been to in my entire life. Right? I'm not going to say Reading, England. Reading, England. Okay. Anyway, it doesn't make a difference. But, okay, it's like basically it's 20 minutes outside of London, and to me it was very boring. Why was it boring? Because at 7 o'clock at night, 7:30, all the stores are closed, except for like a 7-Eleven type store and one bar. So okay, so fine, like one bar, two bars, whatever. Everyone else is walking around like with the beers in their hands, but there's no like place to sit and do it. Now for me, of course, I'm like, okay, so whatever. So at like 7:30, I was like done with my day of work. I'm like, all right, time to get something to eat or whatever. There's nothing to do. So I was like, you know what, Baruch Hashem, there's nothing for me to do. No like distractions. I went back upstairs and I was like, okay. But the idea is that sometimes you can't control where it's going on, and if you take the sukkah with you, meaning you go in there and say, the week that I'm here, spending the time investing in the sukkah, meaning I'm really going to have that in mind, what we did, which we learned from Torah Yud Aleph, which is to really have in mind that this is going to protect me. So then no matter where you are, and sometimes you can't, like I said, you can't control where you are, you can't always, you can do as much as you can. But if you really believe that Hashem, you have real Emunah, then that shadow of Emunah is going to take you and go follow you wherever you go. So that way, you, as much as you can, you're protected from those evil forces as much as you can be. Anyway, so he says like this. Lachen, that's what he says. He says this is why Hashem says he fulfilled, meaning as opposed to the usual terminology, which is anyone who observes the mitzvah, Hashem will do this. He's saying is Hashem in this midrash. Hashem says he fulfilled it, and therefore therefore he's going to do this. What's the difference? He says is because he believed enough to have in mind. Right? He says, look what he says here. I sat in the sukkah knowing, and I trust that this sukkah, this 7 days, this hut that I'm sitting in, made out of earth and everything, it says is this has the power to protect me. And therefore Hashem says, he fulfilled that mitzvah, I'm going to protect him I'm going to shadow him with this, kind of like force field, if you will. He says, and now he says, so he says, there's a very famous question. It says, the pasuk says in Vayikra, it says, we should always know that I put you into Sukkot. Question is, who forced you to sit in a sukkah? Like Hashem said, I put you in Basukoto Shafti means I made you sit there, right? He says maybe it's just a mitzvah that Hashem told you. Therefore, we don't understand the real mitzvah. Hashem says, sit in the tent, sit in the sukkah, because I told you so. Why is it all of a sudden? Because we should always remember that I protected you in Egypt.
Well, it's the same thing with matzah.
Right, exactly. It's a great question. Right, it's a very good question. And the stuff around Haggadah, he asks us a very similar question, if I recall correctly.
It's kind of interesting that we leave what's more secure, our home, and then go into the sukkah to remember that they protected us.
Right.
Even though you're in a much more dangerous place.
Right. That's the whole point. Right. That's
you could otherwise think, it's the walls doing it, it's the ceiling doing it, but in the sukkah.
Here, exactly. Next line. He says here, Omnam ata. Now we understand. Amarnu shasuka hi la'agein aleinu me'avivim azikim. Hadiyah hi muchrechet v'day she'im ba'avato otanu yishkiach aleinu b'mitzvah zo afal pi she'einanu b'makom sakana. Right? He says, we're not in a dangerous place, right? Most of the time, when you have your sukkah, you feel, your sukkah is on your porch, your sukkah is on some place. It's not like you're really in a danger of like, yes, outside of Israel, you're maybe more dangerous. And that's why people don't sleep as much as outside. It's colder. But in a normal setting, your sukkah is in a place where you're kind of comfortable. Let's be realistic, right? 99% of the time.
That one is driving around.
Right, exactly. You don't really have, you're really not that nervous. Right.
It's also not sleeping because the sukkah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. There are people like that. Chabad don't do that. Right. Chabad definitely don't sleep in the sukkah. But anyway, so he says he's like this. So he says, B'kol makom, if Hashem really loves us, and right, in other words, בעבתו אותנו השגיח עלינו במסע זו, אף על פי שאין לנו במקום סכנה, מכל שכן שכבר השגיח על אבותינו, שהיו במדבר מקום שליטת המזיקים, נחש, שרף, ועקרב. So he says is, because he loves us, even in a place when we're, in a place when we are protected, Hashem told us, I love you, and therefore I want you to remember what's going on, so that when you remember and recall that at one point in time, Bnei Israel were in a dangerous situation, and they needed this protection. In the middle of the desert, they needed this protection. So therefore, I want you, when you feel protected, I want you to remember the fact that, I love you so much, I want you to remember what I can do for you. Meaning it's, yes, in my home, I feel great that I'm sitting in a sukkah with 4 walls, and thankfully, nothing's really going to happen. He says, but Hashem's saying is, I love you. And it's not just I command you to do, just do it. I'm telling you.
Same protection.
What?
I'm going to show
It's
you
the same protection.
It's the same protection, right?
Same Hashem.
No, but in the house you forget.
Right, exactly.
It's Hashem.
Right, so he's saying is come outside, sit in this, temporary thing. Remember the love that I give you now, that you feel a little unsafe, but remember that how unsafe the Avot really felt, and then you can say, okay, that's real protection. So what I feel, my little temporary discomfort is even more so, it should be much more meaningful when I feel like a little uncomfortable. And that, by the way, that's one of the reasons why, at least the way I look at it, is that one of the reasons why we should actually build a sukkah, meaning a sukkah should actually take some effort to build. Like it doesn't just be like, oh, I just pop the top off my, my roof, like lift a little thing, right? Like there should be some effort in the mitzvah, because you want to really understand and appreciate that value of there's wind coming in. That's why I always enjoy building the sukkah, because there's something to it.
You have a real challenge over there.
Yeah, in our house, yes, I've had many. I've had my sukkahs literally blown off.
Yes,
multiple
Shlomo
times.
said there's a problem there with the wind. And
Yeah, it's a very big problem. Yeah, and in fact, the Rav actually said is we're allowed to. Most people say you shouldn't use
the plastic.
The plastic, no, the the ties on the schach, because it's because the schach, it should be connected to the thing.
You can't have a sukkah there.
Exactly.
There's a way to do it that's not an issue, because you sandwich the schach.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways,
you tie the sandwich
so
to
he says that, and we know that one of the big things is right. So he basically says, like the Rav of our Yeshuv says, that the ruach mitzuya of everywhere else is not a ruach mitzuya of Neve Daniel. It's a totally different ruach, and therefore you have to think about what the ruach mitzuya of Neve Daniel is, and therefore factor that in when where your house is in relation to the wind, because that makes a huge difference in how much of what protection you need anyway.
Has it improved now?
No, it has not improved.
No, but the fact that you're doing the tying it down.
Yeah. My house, I also have to factor in how big, the different. I don't use cloth at all for my.
So you don't light in the sukkah. You light in your house.
I've never. First, not because I don't want to. It's because A, could them blow out, and second, because I'm always nervous that little kids and someone's going to touch it and whatever.
There's been fires in Yerushalayim. I recommend people light in their house.
Anyway, so he says this. Now he says, so he says is we should also another question comes up, that even converts, gerim, kol ezrach. I think he means here gerim. I don't think he means converts. I think he means foreigners, meaning non-Jews, but I'm not.
Don't plan to be Jews.
Right. I think that's what he means. Is that what he says?
I'm not sure that's the case. I think he means converts.
But then
you would have thought converts were concluded because it's b'schus avotenu.
Okay, maybe he says here like this. He says, "Afidi v'azar ha'erev rav shayu gerim lo niklatu tachat otam asukot shal ne'akavod v'inkein minadin shayu gerim turim minam tzvazo." Oh, so you're right. I'm sorry. So he says the erev rav who were converted according to the Zohar and Parashat Kitisa, he says is they weren't protected. They weren't. In some way, they weren't protected, or they didn't benefit from the honor of kavod, and therefore, if that's the case, then we should say all converts are patur, because they didn't have that historical, moment, right?
And then the pasuk comes along to teach Kol HaEzra.
Right. Moshe יקבל אותו הערב רב לא רצה נמי שיהיו מוקפים מצל הקדוש. אמנם הגרים של דורות הבאים הקדוש ברוך הוא חפץ בהם, הקפיד בהם לזכותם. He says, no, yes. At the time, at the time, Moshe said is, Hashem, these Gerim, maybe they shouldn't get that, they shouldn't be part of this cloud of glory. Hashem says, maybe you're right, but I want the Gerim of next generation and the generation after that and the generation afterwards to benefit from this protection. So if I don't tell them now to do it, forget it. It's gone. So
it's a weird thing though, because, you know, as an immigrant in the United States, like my ancestors that I know of did not participate in the Civil War.